Cuthbert Dibble in the Coggery colours, currently rated 125.
Cuthbert Dibble grobs out a success.
Unexpected party of the Dan Skelton yard. It's definitely a horse that the Skeltons can target with these big handicap pots, and I think at one point he's going to pick one up.
Well, there might be a party tonight. Unexpected party wins the Johnny Henderson Grandeur.
Etalon, currently rated 120. I say I mark 120 currently. I think that is very much on the low side. I think he's got scope to improve way beyond that.
Well, that favourite wins easily, Etalon.
Next up on my list is a horse that I really like, and that's Spillane's Tower. And I think it's time for him to kick on this season.
Spillane's Tower is holding Monday's power at the line. Spillane's Tower takes
The Neil King train, Look Away, make a mark 122, look very lenient indeed.
And Look Away makes every single yard to take the Skybet novices hurdle.
Hello and the warmest of welcomes to the new series of The Jump Show. It feels great to be back alongside Dan and Jake, who are both back and who are both bringing sexy back after no doubt what has been a nasty summer without any jumps racing, or at least any good jumps racing, I'm sure they would say. And here we are in the winter months, very much looking forward to all the action that's going to be coming over the next few weeks and months ahead of the Cheltenham Festival. Jake, start with you. How are you, sir? It's very nice to see you. And I have to say, you're looking extremely well.
Oh, thank you, Bully. It's great to be back. I think we've been absolutely itching to get going with the videos, with our research. Plenty of it's been done, and we got some news hot off the press just before we started recording, didn't we, about the Cheltenham Festival changes, which obviously we will discuss in the future episodes. But yeah, I can't wait to get going. September is an exciting time to start getting some trainer quotes and all that type of stuff. So yeah, bring it all on.
Absolutely, yeah. That news will be discussed in a seasonal preview a little bit further down the line, so keep an eye out for that. And the other man on this podcast is Mr. Daniel Overall, who enjoyed quite the season last year with a couple of really good winners amongst his handicappers to follow. Dan, hopefully more of the same from you this year. Apart from that, though, it's bloody good to see you.
Oh, likewise, mate. And take one with the intro. Look at you. Fluent as always. No rust on this man. Consummate professional as always. Can't say the same of myself. But it really is good to be back. And I'm not even just phoning it in. I've been excited for an unnecessarily long period of time. It feels like I'm more excited for any season than I have been in recent times. And I can't really figure out why. Really excited to be back, working on horses to follow, handicappers to follow. Just looking forward to the 120 rated horses I hold so dearly close to my chest. Yeah, let's get started.
Absolutely, let's get stuck in. The first video is going to be this one, and it's the first part of our handicappers to follow. Just to let you know, if you do like this video and we get to 100 likes, episode 2 of the handicappers to follow will follow from this, and it will be unlocked. So make sure you click that button and indeed subscribe to The Jump Show, because it really does help us out. Okay, without further ado, it's over to Dan with his first handicapper to follow of 2024 and 2025.
My first handicapper to follow for the season ahead is Milkery, trained by Nicky Richards, also bolted up in a point-to-point bumper before joining the yard. He made his debut straight over hurdles over 2 mile 5 at Ayr, when he looking as raw as you could possibly look really on that occasion. Jumping wasn't fluent, he was awkward under pressure, but still finished a really respectable third behind a couple of useful types, looking a real work in progress. He then had a 3-month absence. When we saw him again, he was dropped back to 2 mile 1, which is a bit of a surprise given the way he stayed on over 2 mile 5, and clearly there's a lot of stamina in his pedigree, and unsurprisingly he looked a bit outpaced that day, but still probably a few more strides he would have won on that occasion, staying on really well to the line. It looked like he had slowly learnt from his first experience. He then won in facile fashion up to an intermediate trip at Carlisle on heavy ground, where his main market rival pulled out quite late, so I think he went off 1-4 in the end. That came pretty late on in the season, and I was surprised to see him run on a handicap debut at Ayr at the Scottish Grand National meeting in a really competitive novice handicap hurdle over 3 miles. The 3 miles definitely going to be his trip in time. But I was surprised to see just 13 days after winning his main hurdle that he was set what was quite a tough assignment. It was a really deep novice handicap for the grade. It was won by Chosen Witness for Willie Mullins, like many races around that time of the year were. And despite only finishing 6th, I thought he shaped really encouragingly on that occasion. Still looked like a bit of a work in progress, understandably, but I think that experience will really bring him on. He was generously dropped £1 for that run to a mark 117, despite, I say, performing above my expectations for him. him. I think he's got a lot more to offer this season and indeed for the seasons ahead, especially as a staying chaser on deep ground, as so many of the Trevor Hemmings horses do. He's by Milan. He's a full brother to Camp Milan, who's an out-and-out stayer. And if you look at his page, it really is just all stamina. I expect him to be sent over fences sooner rather than later, and I'd be disappointed if he can't leave the mark 117 well behind, especially when getting 3 miles over fences. I think he'll probably start over 2.5 miles, and I think that'll probably be an adequate starting point for him. But in time, I expect him to be the type of horse who's competing in some of those top northern staying handicap chases.
Great stuff, Dan. Thanks very much indeed. Hopefully you'll be milking it with Milkery throughout the rest of the season. That is Dan's first handicapper to follow. Over to the man with all the facts and figures at his fingertips. It's Mr. Jake Price.
My first handicapper for the 24-25 season is Weston in the Park. Now, he was a £100,000 point-to-point recruit, and he did alright in bumpers during his first season, winning at Stratford en route to finishing 12th in the Aintree bumper, which is quite creditable considering it's a Grade 2 contest. But last season was all about going hurdling, getting that crucial jumping experience into him and learning, how to properly race in Britain. And he did that quite well. He had a bit of a blip on his first start over 2-2 at Exeter, which is just on the short side for him, but stepped up to 2.5 when moved to Anthony Charlton in the middle of the winter. He won twice, firstly at Plumpton in January, and then he followed up under a penalty at Fakenham with an even more impressive success by 4 lengths. And I think what makes that success so impressive is the fact that he's such a big horse. He's a massive, great big unit, and to win around a really sharp track like Fakenham just shows that he does have a little bit of speed to go with his stamina, albeit 3 miles will be his bag this season, I'm sure. That impressive victory catapulted him into the EBF final at Sandown, which is obviously a race that works out year on year. You saw in the montage at the start of this video, the likes of Etalon and Cuthbert Dibble came from the race last year and they went up bundles in the handicap. So it's easily done. And, Weston in the Park, I thought, ran an absolute cracker that day. He came from miles off the pace. He was basically out the back, turning for home. Came through the field, ran a cracker off a mark of 118 to finish 5th, only beaten 6.5 lengths by Champagne Twist, the eventual winner. Which obviously Peak Rock was in second as well, and I think they're 2 really nice horses for Ben Pauling this year as well. So this season's all going to be about chasing. Weston in the Park sire is Walk in the Park, as you can probably assume, and he has a 50% win record with his chasers, the horses that he's sired that go chasing. So I think that's a massive positive. And another big positive actually is that he switched stables to Ollie Murphy over the summer. So he's going to be in the care of Ollie Murphy now, the same ownership, but in the care of Ollie Murphy. And I think off a mark of 119, he's just going to improve bundles this year. I can't see a way in which he goes over fences and doesn't improve at least £10. I'd be shocked if he's not in the high 130s come what may.
Yeah, he's an interesting one, Jake. Obviously comes from that EBF final, good run there, but I wasn't sure at the time whether that race was as deep as it has been in previous renewals. Obviously, normally a race we look at fondly, season after season, produces many good types, but I didn't think going into last season's that it was as deep as it normally is. Do you think it was an up-to-scratch renewal, or what are your thoughts in general?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it's probably not as strong as previous years. Well, in the montage at the start of this video, we saw 2 of the horses, didn't we? But I think Champagne Twist was a good winner of the race. I think he's a good horse to take going forward, and Peak Rock as well, obviously his stablemate. I think they're 2 very nice horses. It's quite interesting that Weston in the Park came from quite far off the pace as well. I think that really does help his cause as to saying that he's ahead of his form. But I think for him especially, it's just the fact that he's going chasing is going to be turning him inside out, and he should be a far, far better horse this season.
Okay, great stuff, Jake and Dan there. Yeah, really interesting thoughts on Weston in the Park. Looking forward to seeing what he can do throughout the course of the campaign. Over to me, unfortunately, I hear you say, and to my first handicapper to follow. And I'm going all the way to Eastern Europe. Oh, I can feel the excitement gnawing at my bones ahead of the National Hunt season 2024 to 2025. And my first handicapper to follow for this season's jump show is Dubrovnik Harry for Harry Fry, a horse who's already shown some very good form in handicap hurdles last season, finishing 4th in the Potemps and 3rd in a Premier Handicap at Sandown. He had his niggling problems, a few issues last year. Hopefully, though, they've all been smoothed out ahead of this 8-year-old campaign. I think he retains plenty of potential. He's got a huge size and scope. Might go chasing. They tried that earlier in the year. Didn't quite get a plan, but if they go back over fences, he's definitely got the size to be a very useful tool over those larger obstacles. And if they keep hurdling, I don't think it's going to matter either, because he's already got that good form in the book, with the potential, given he's so lightly raced, of more to come. So either chasing or hurdling, Dubrovnik Harry is a handicapper very much to keep on side.
Yeah, that's great, Tom. Dubrovnik Harry is a horse that I've had on my radar for a long time. But what do you think he's going to do this season? Over fences or stay over hurdles?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, Jake. I wouldn't really necessarily know per se. That said, if it were up to me, I would definitely send him chasing. You've only seen one start over fences so far. He's a big type, always has been very scopy and sizable. And I've always thought he'd turn into a chaser. He's had his niggling issues, as I said. He's got his injury problems in the past. And I think that's been a sort of waylaid his challenge over fences as such. But now that he had that nice, almost error-free campaign over hurdles last season, in which you could get a relatively decent routine together over the smaller obstacles, now might be the time. He's the perfect age to go chasing. And I don't think that that first run we saw over fences a few months ago was by any means devoid of promise. So hopefully he can really discover his potential over those larger obstacles now. And I think he's definitely got the build to succeed greatly. So hopefully I think fences are going to be the way they go. But of course, I've been wrong many times in the past.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens there. But let's go straight back to Dan for his next horse.
My second handicapper to follow is a Dan Skelton-trained Valgrand, who remains a novice hurdler for this season, but I think he's got a really tempting mark, 118, which I'm hoping they exploit early in the season. He finished second in a point-to-point, but didn't look to stay on that occasion, and he made his rules debut at Cheltenham, so given quite a tough task for his rules debut, and he shaped really encouragingly to finish second behind the Kembrell Brewery, staying on from off the pace. We then didn't see him for about 5 months, and connections commented since that he's a horse who probably wants a decent surface. See, a lot of the winter ground wasn't going to really suit him, so they gave him plenty of time, and we next saw him at the Aintree Festival for the Grade 2 bumper. And bearing in mind that break and the fact he's only finished second in one bumper previously, he went off 15-2 for that race, which I think shows you the regard in which he's held to be such a short price, given it's a very competitive race as it often is, and many had probably better form and more experience, but he shaped really nicely in fourth, again coming from off the pace on the inside, really respectable run. And interestingly, Connections decided to sort of make hay while the ground was in his favour. They sent him hurdling just after the turn of May, so he retained his novice status, won over 2 miles on his hurdling debut in a race which I think is going to work out to be above average for the time of year. He pulled clear with a Harry Fry horse called Cap West, who came into the season with quite a big reputation. They pulled clear, and the third was actually quite a decent bumper winner in his own right prior to that, so I think that was a decent performance. He then went off really short odds under a penalty over 2.5 miles when made to work a bit harder and was probably expected to beat a horse called Speed Davis, but I don't think the small field, the forcing tactics really suited, and I did like the way he picked up when eventually asked to, so I actually think that's probably protected his mark and left him on what really is a tempting handicap mark. Now his novice status does mean that they could potentially look at going for some early season graded targets. The Persian War has been touted as a potential, and it would almost be reminiscent of Look Away last year, where there's clearly a well-handicapped horse, but thrown into graded company to exploit him probably being ahead of the curve from an early season perspective. But I hope they look to exploit that mark early on in the season. I think it'll be a horse you see a lot early and then probably have a mid-season break a bit like last year, but I think there's little doubt that Valgrand is a very well-handicapped horse of 118, and I would be very surprised if he isn't a fair bit higher in the ratings come the end of the season.
Yeah, Valgrand is a very interesting horse. Obviously, he is a novice. Do you think there's any chance that he might be going for the Persian War at the start of the season?
It's Look Away all over again, isn't it? I mean, it clearly does seem to be in their plans, and just the fact he's got a mark of 118, like, you think they'd look at that and just go, I mean, we chuck this guy into any handicap, he's going to win quite comfortably. I know he can't qualify for some of the better ones, obviously, because he only had the 2 starts, but any 0 to 125, 0 to 130, class 3, 118, the caliber of horse he is, he should just absolutely dot up off, but we know the Scots don't necessarily mind throwing one in the deep end relatively soon. Obviously, they've done this with probably a long-term plan in mind. But even if he went to the Persian War, I think there's a chance he probably bumps into a really high-profile smart type that often runs in that, probably isn't quite up to that standard. But if he runs a credible second and third there, may go up a few pounds. But I still think there's going to be plenty of races down the line for him. Hopefully, they don't completely obliterate his mark, a la Look Away. Because what could have been last year? We would have had the Greatwood winner. But there you go.
Okay, good stuff. Valgrand for Dan. Time to get back to Jake with his next handicapper to follow. As always, Jake has been squirreling away.
The next horse on my list is a homebred, and he's probably one of the nicest looking horses in training, to be honest, and that's Secret Squirrel of the Huey Morrison team. Now, Huey is a trainer who is probably best known for his exploits on the flat, but he's had plenty of success over jumps too, none less than Not So Sleepy, who won the Fighting Fifth last year. And there's probably a few similarities between the two horses that we can draw, but we'll get onto that in a minute. So Secret Squirrel was a dual bumper winner was an easy winner on hurdles debut at Kempton in November. And then he was a close second to Jericho de Repine in an intermediate hurdle at Newbury. And I think that was quite a good effort, really, because it was quite soft ground that day, which probably isn't best suiting to Secret Squirrel. I think he probably wants it a little bit quicker to show his speed. But it was a good effort nonetheless. And they got him a bit of better ground at Taunton in February, but unfortunately he made a mistake at the last, which really just paved his chances against Firefly, who they were, locked in battle, and he just went down a neck on the line. So that was a good effort over 2 mile free. Ran on the flat in the meantime, but coming back to hurdles, back down to 2 miles, ridden a bit more prominently, he absolutely bolted up in Taunton in February, in April. And that was really where you saw what Secret Squirrel can do, because he just lengthened so nicely out of the last, beating Helmwine of all horses by 5 lengths. He went up a pound for that to a mark of 126 in the Novices Championship final handicap hurdle on the last day of the season at Sandown, which looked quite lenient, to be honest. And obviously Helmwine, the horse he'd previously beat, went on to win that race quite nicely. He was 5 pound better off with Secret Squirrel, but I think Secret Squirrel ran a really nice race himself, because he was bang there until the last, and he just made a horror mistake at the last, which really put pay to his chances. And in the end, his losing distance got exaggerated because of that mistake. He's been left on an unchanged mark of 126, however, for the current season. And I think he's probably going to go down a similar path to Not So Sleepy, in the fact that he'll start in the listed 2 mile handicap hurdle at Ascot. And then after that, he can probably go on to the Betfair Exchange handicap hurdle, again at Ascot in December, which both were races that Not So Sleepy won. So I think that if he gets a bit of better ground, that will definitely help him, because he can utilise that flat speed that he has. But if he's come in stronger this year, which Hughie Morrison thinks he has, I think he's going to really attack these 2 mile handicap hurdles this season off his current mark.
Yeah, Jake, I really like that one. One of the most unique looking horses in training as well. Really do like him as a prospect going forward. And I think we're both of the opinion that Sandown race at the end of the season is going to work out quite well. And that may give us a couple of clues as to some other horses we may be included on this list should we release part 2 of this video. But another horse, similar rating, but completely different profile in terms of the type of horse I think he will be, is my next horse to follow. My next handicapper to follow is your archetypal chaser in the making. He was just biding his time over hurdles last year, and that's Leader in the Park for Ben Pauling. He won his sole point-to-point by 56 lengths. Now, admittedly, the horse who was challenging the most on that occasion did fall, so that does greatly exaggerate the margin of victory. But he was well backed on that occasion and clearly came with a bit of reputation. And so it was quite unsurprising, really, to see him quite well backed for his rules debut, which came in a good race at Ascot. He finished a really respectable second on that occasion, finishing behind Far Nose, who's now rated 132, and Excello was back in third, who's obviously now rated 142 over fences. He was a bit disappointing on his next start, but he was given a 2-month break, and when he returned, he beat a horse called Grand Albert quite comfortably. That horse is now rated 121. And Ben Pauling was very clear after that victory that it's all about next season with this horse. He's very much earmarked for chasing. It could have gone to the EBF final with him. That was an option, but Ben Pauling already had so many options. And they actually decided to give him a bit of a harder test for his final start, which came at Cheltenham's April meeting in a race that I think is going to work out really well. He only finished 4th on that occasion, trying to make the running on the new course, which we know is quite difficult to do. And he was actually running a really good race, made a bit of an error at the last when he probably would have finished 2nd or 3rd, ended up finishing 4th, and I'd say that late error probably exaggerated the margin of his defeat. But now I think he's a horse we're really going to see the best of over fences, and I think that mark 121 really does look right for exploiting in some early season novice handicap chases. He's by Walk in the Park. He's a half-brother to Grade 1 winning chaser Beneficent, so he's bred to be well above average, and I think there's an awful lot more to come from this horse, especially when he's sent over a fence.
Yeah, Leader in the Park was definitely a horse who was on my long list. And I had some very interesting news recently, actually, that he was running with a broken rib. I think Connection did a bone scan at the end of the season, and it was right on his girth, so surely there's plenty of improvement to come just from that being healed.
Yeah, I've never heard of that one before. That's completely new to me, so I have no idea how many pounds that translates to in terms of potential improvement. But hey, I guess that's good news. To say there should be, broken rib or not, there should be so much more to come from him. He's just that archetypal chaser. So yeah, high hopes for him. I think he could be a double-figure pound improver of the fences.
Yeah, I never run in a race with a broken rib, but if I had, I can imagine it would be very uncomfortable indeed. So hopefully more improvement to come there. Right, Jake, over to your next handicapper to follow.
Next up, we go to the north, where Lucinda Russell has a ridiculous team of novice handicap chasers to go to war with this season. She's got the likes of Meertown, Inox Allen, Cadell, Whistle Stop Tour, and especially Primrose. I think he was probably the closest to making my list. But the horse I have settled on as being the best handicapped of the lot is Choose a Copper. He was a 95k point-to-point recruit who won easily on his hurdles debut at Hexham in October and was described as a brilliant horse by his trainer that day. And he was actually pushed out to a listed race for his next start. He stayed at 2 miles and he was a close third behind Booster Bob and Helmwine in a listed novices hurdle on Tingle Creek Day, which I thought was a good effort. He's definitely a 3-miler, long-term project, so the fact that he could finish as close as he could to those 2 nice horses over 2 miles shows that he's got plenty of ability. And, on his next start, when he stepped up the 2 mile, 6.5 furlong at Kelso, you probably thought, right, we're in, this is it. He was sent off odds on, tongue tie went on for the first time. He's finally going up in trip, and he just really tired at the finish. And after that, he then went back down in trip to 2 mile, 2 furlongs for the Grade 2 Premier Novices hurdle. And again, he was in a prominent position, racing nicely out in the front, and then he just lost his position completely, turning for home. He eventually plugged on for 6th, but he was sent straight for a wind-up after that, and you could see from those 2 runs he desperately needed it because he just wasn't seeing out his races at all. He was given a bit of a break after that, as you'd expect, having had a wind-up, and he returned at Perth in April, where he finished second to Rambo T, who's a horse rated 134 for Ollie Murphy, and that was only a 2.5 mile handicap hurdle at their finale meeting. He's only been raised £1 to 117 for that second, which I thought was a much better effort. He clearly saw his race out. He was just beaten by the better horse on the day. And now his wind is sorted. I think he's going to develop into a brilliant novice chaser. Obviously, he was a point-to-point recruit. His sire is well chosen, who has a 56% win rate with his chasers, which is quite strong. And he's also a half-brother to Copper West, who was a horse who showed nowhere near as much over hurdles, but still went from 114 to 127 in his first season chasing. So Lucinda Russell can't wait for him to go chasing, but she's obviously been patient with him. He's had his issues. I think they've been sorted now. And off a mark of 117, I think that he can really do some damage in these novice handicap chasers this season.
Great stuff, Jake. A succinct case made, as always, for your third handicapper to follow of the video. Right, time for my second one. Looking forward to this horse. I think he's got a very bright future. I've been burrowing my way through the form book like a beavering little badger, and I've come up with another handicapper to follow for this season, and that is Tell Her the Name. Used to be with Ben Pauling last season, has now gone to the new duo of John Joe and AJ O'Neill. I think they're going to invigorate this horse. Switch of scenery is going to help. He was very impressive on 2 starts at Huntingdon in Novice Company last season. Went to the Cheltenham Festival, ran in the Supreme behind Slade Seal. Nothing really went right for him. I don't think he enjoyed the ground that day, but he's got so much left to come. I think he's a really exciting prospect in the making. And the Greatwood Handicap Hurdle at Cheltenham is the first port of call for him. I think he's nicely handicapped, and if he is going to be a graded or grade 1 performer in the making, he'll be needing to win this. I think he can, so that hopefully is going to be the perfect start to my second handicapper to follow. That is Tell Her the Name.
Yeah, I like that one, Bully. A horse I was a big fan of last season. Really had high hopes for him. Obviously missed an engagement he probably could have done well in the Betfair Hurdle. Then Deep Grand Supreme didn't really go right for him. But surely a lot more to come. But what do you think of the stable switch there? Obviously leaving Ben Pauling's yard, a yard that's thriving, seemingly growing, going to the new John Joe, AJ O'Neill partnership. Obviously trainer of a lot of history. But what are your thoughts on that stable move? Seemed a bit of an odd one at the time.
Yeah, the stable move is interesting. I think they were reasoning behind the Megsons doing it was to kind of mix things up a bit and get some new scenery. As far as John Joe and AJ O'Neill are concerned, I think I have all the respect in the world for John Joe as a trainer over the years. You know, he's so wise. He's like an old sage now, isn't he? He's been there, done it. Almost every big race you could possibly think of. But I do think over the last 3 or 4 years, perhaps a bit of impetus has been needed to change things around a bit. And having been to the yard recently, and seen how AJ is operating with his dad, I think it's really encouraging us to their future because AJ is really switched on. He's got loads of big ideas and ambitions. He's also very intelligent. So I think that's going to play a big part. And I think possibly going to see a slight upturn in fortunes for the O'Neill yard. I think they had a slightly better season last year than they had done previously. And hopefully they can continue in that regard. And go up that upward trajectory which they were on last season into this season. So fingers crossed for AJ and John Joe O'Neill. And, of course, tell her the name. Dan, on to your final handicapper of this video.
My final handicapper to follow for this video is a mare I've been a fan of for a while. She was actually one of the winless ones to watch going into last season, and it's a Sam Thomas trained Alfie's Princess, who won on her hurdling debut, and I thought really gritty fashion at Chepstow early in the season. Attritional condition, she was keen throughout. It looked like she'd probably just fade late on, but she kept finding to dig deep and win really impressively in the end, beating a horse called Florence the Machine, who's now rated 116. She then made all under a penalty at Exeter when next seen. I don't think that's easy to do for mares carrying a penalty, so again I think that was a good performance, and thereafter she was set some pretty tough tasks in a really deep listed race at Haydock. She finished a respectable 5th, again under positive tactics, which probably didn't suit the way that race panned out. She then finished 3rd in a very good handicap for the standards, it turned out, at Sandown. The 2nd, 4th and 5th all won next time out. The 4th was a horse called Zane Knight, who actually racked up a 3-timer, so that looks really creditable form, and she finished her season with a very good 2nd in the very valuable Mares Handicap Hurdle Final at Newbury, again faring much the best of those who raced prominently. The ready winner came from off the pace, as did many of the horses who finished around Alfie's Princess, so I think it was credit to her ability that she managed to stick on for as long as possible in a race that suited hold-up horses. It's probably likely she'll go chasing now from a mark 119, and I don't think we've seen the best of her. Her run style is made for chasing. She's a bold, jumping front runner. We generally see those types excel over fences, and she did win a point-to-point in her own right and is related to some very useful chasers. So all the signs are there for her to be a much better mare over fences than she was over hurdles, and she's only had 7 career starts under rules, despite being a 7-year-old. Very lightly raced for her age. Sam Thomas was talking, potentially looking at the mare's novice hurdle after she won on her hurdling debut, and I think she's been a mare that they've always held in really high regard. Probably hasn't hit the heights that were expected of her, but I think fences are going to be her game, and from a mark 119 I think there'll be a lot of improvement to come, and given Sam Thomas's MO generally having them ready early in the season, she's one to make sure to have in your trackers.
Okay, Dan, thanks very much indeed for that. Best of luck with Alfie's Princess. And the final handicapper to follow comes from Jake in this video, whose name best describes something that my horses never do.
The last horse on my list for this episode is a Oliver Greenhill and Josh Guerriero trained horse, who seem to be an ever-improving operation, and they've got some really nice types to go chasing with this season, the likes of White Rhino, Jaguar, but the one I'm going to side with is Making Headway. Now, he was a £50,000 point-to-point recruit who made a really good start to life under rules for the team when winning on hurdles debut at Carlisle on heavy ground in October. And after that, Connections decided he was good enough to step forward to the Grade 2 Newton Novices Hurdle at Haydock, which obviously shows just how much they thought of him. And if the ground was a little bit softer that day, he probably would have won, but he ran a cracker to finish 2nd to Camdenaz on only a 2nd start under rules. But herein lies the issues with last season, to be honest. He then went to the Grade 1 Formby Novices Hurdle on Boxing Day at Aintree, and look, he got this soft ground that he needed, that's for sure, but he just doesn't have the pace to keep up with these Grade 1 novices. He ran on really strongly towards the finish to get 4th, but he just got outpaced down the home straight. He got away with it at Newbury, staying over the trip of 2 miles when making all in a heavy ground novice hurdle. He beat East India Express that day, who's a nice horse himself. So he did get away with it there. But when going back to Sandown for the Imperial Cup, a handicap hurdle off a mark of 129, again, he came up against these seasoned pros over 2 miles, these nice quick horses, and he again got outpaced at the bottom of the hill before, you guessed it, making headway towards the finish and staying on for 4th. He finally tackled 2.5 miles at Aintree in April when he was sent off a well-fancied 13-2 shot for their Premier Handicap hurdle, but his chances were just ended at the 3rd flight really, where he made an uncharacteristic mistake. He's usually a brilliant jumper. That day at Newbury, put in a fantastic round. But I think there's plenty to forgive him. He's wearing first-time cheek pieces. He may have just been a bit over the top at that point. But I think this season now he's going to go chasing off a mark of 127. I think that he's got plenty of improvement to come. If he can translate that ability to jump a hurdle so well to over fences, then he's going to be flying over these fences, and it's going to be hard to catch. I think he's going to be obviously stepping up in trips to 2.5 miles. I think he'll probably start off in a novice handicap chase over that trip, which will be great off a mark of 127. And I think Connections, rightly have aspirations for him to be a graded novice chaser in time.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the episode. Plenty of handicappers to keep an eye on for the forthcoming season there from Jake, Dan, and from me as well. Remember, please do like our video. If we get to 100, we shall be releasing part 2 of our handicappers to follow. Jake and Dan have been working studiously, and I've been putting my 2 cents in as well. So please do give us a like and subscribe to our channel. It really does help us out. There'll be plenty more to come over the course of the next few weeks here on The Jump Show. It is superb to be back, and we'd love to hear from you with your favourite handicappers and perhaps ones that you'd like to follow over the course of the next few months or so that maybe might be different to ours, or indeed if you agree or disagree. But for now, from Jake, Dan, and from me, it's goodbye. From episode 1 here on The Jump Show, it feels so good to be back.